have to tell you guys, this book is incredible. It literally opens your eyes. I mean, not to be a cliche, but it does. And also for all the students out there who are thinking of majoring in art, and your parents are leery of possible careers having to do with art, Amy can tell you the amazing work she has done with a master's in art history. So let's hit it.
Okay.
Talk to me about how you came up with this whole concept, because you use it with the NYPD, with the FBI, with medical students.
Right. It is, first of all, I love what I do, so thank you for that welcome, and I'm really glad to be here. I started this program because I studied art history undergraduate. Loved it, but like so many people, didn't quite know what to do with my career, so I went to law school. Hated it. Knew within the first 6 weeks of law school that I hated it, but I went on, finished law school, practiced law, and said there has to be a way to get back to the art world. So I started this program. I worked here at the Frick Collection in New York City, and I started the program for medical students. Now, the idea wasn't mine. The idea came from Yale to take medical students out of the hospital, bring them to an art museum, teach them how to look at works of art, so when they go back to the hospital, they'll be better observers of their patients. And one night I was out to dinner with friends, and my friend said, "Why are you just doing this for medical students? Why aren't you doing it for people who really need observation skills?" I said, "Like whom?" He said, "Like cops, like homicide cops."
Like people thrust into situations where you have to make split-second decisions.
Exactly.
And observe everything around you, both in minute detail and the big picture.
Exactly, and that was the rationale. So I picked up the phone and I called the NYPD. I just cold called them and I said,
Wait. I have to interrupt you for a second,
Yes.
Amy. You call 911 and you're like, hey.
That's exactly what I did. And I want you to picture the guy at the switchboard, okay? So I pick up the phone and I say, "Hi, my name is Amy Herman. I'm the head of education at the Frick, and I have a great idea. I train medical students to enhance their observation skills, and I think it would be awesome for cops." There was dead silence on the other end of the phone.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. I was transferred 7 times. 7 times through the police academy, and finally I got a deputy commissioner who said, "Miss Herman, if this is such a visual thing, why are we on the phone?" I knew he got it. 6 months later, every new captain in the NYPD had to take my class. Thank you.
Your book details the ride-alongs that you went on.
Yeah.
Talk me through the before and after, in a way, of a cop who didn't take the class versus one who did.
Well, I'll give you my very first experience of a ride-along was actually in law school. When you take criminal procedure back in the day when I went to law school, you had to go on a ride-along with the local police department, and I was in Washington, D.C. And all my friends said, "Just go in the cop car, you stop for coffee and donuts, nothing happens, and then they drop you off." Well, that didn't happen in my ride-along. We got a call, and it was a domestic violence call. And I remember climbing the stairs with the cops, thinking in my head, "What's happening here? How did I get here?" And one cop stationed himself in front of the door, and his partner was to the side, and I'm sweating, like back in the stairwell, thinking, how am I gonna get out of here? And I remember thinking, I didn't do this back then, but I remember thinking the one cop is in the door, his partner's at the side. When that door opens, how much information does he have to take in? Who's got a weapon? Who made the call? What's the problem? Who's in danger? And what am I gonna do next? And in the next 10th of a second, he had to communicate that to his partner who could not see into the apartment. And that experience made such an impact on me that when designing this program, I thought, I need to be able to help cops communicate more effectively. And because my background is in art, I thought, I'm going to use art as the data to do this.
Oh my God, that just gave me chills. Because that's such a visceral description of what it's like.
I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 20 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. And every time I work with cops, I think what they're facing all the time, and I want to be able to give them the tools to help them do their jobs more effectively.
And this allows them to both see the big picture, which is the apartment, the door that they're facing,
Right.
and then zone in on the minute details that make or break the situation.
That's what works of art do too. You're looking at a painting and you see the big picture, and then I force them, what's that up in the corner? What's in the lower right? Where's the light coming from? And they get it. They talk about paintings as if they're at a crime scene. And I do a lot of work in surveillance and counterterrorism. And think about what you're looking at when you're following suspects and when you're thinking about scenarios. And art, I think, is the perfect vehicle to do this.
Now, we're not going to let you guys off the hook. You will be involved and you're going to be put to work very shortly. But before we do that, I want to ask you about a story in your book, not a story, I mean, it's a true story, that really, really got to me, the pilots. About pilots who were so focused on one tiny detail that they completely ignored what was going on around them.
Absolutely. It was a tragic case, actually. And I even hate to tell this story because I flew in last night and I fly multiple times a week. But this was a crew, and before a plane lands, wheels come down. And there are indications for the crew that the wheels have come down. And the light had burned out on the wheels down indicator. And they became so focused on the fact that the light had burned out. They didn't even think that the light had burned out. Why weren't the wheels down? What are we going to do? And they went into what I think was a panic. And they failed to step back and look at the big picture. They had insurance. There's a mirror. There are backup checks. But they panicked because the light did not go on, that the wheels came down. And what was so disturbing was the wheels were down, and they ignored everything else, and the plane crashed, and many, many people lost their lives. And it's not a shortcoming on the training of the pilots or the crew of the airplane, all of us. It's called inattentional blindness. We're so focused on one task that we don't see what's right in front of our eyes. And if the crew had thought about the big picture and said, okay, I can't worry about this light, let's go to the backup. Let's see if the wheels have come down, they could have saved that plane from a crash. And it had tragic results, but it forces us all to think, okay, in the book I talk about realigning your expectations. Okay, I can't solve the problem this way. We need to find another way to solve the problem. So it was tragic. I think about it all the time, especially when I'm flying.
Trust me, reading it, I was like, wow. I mean, that's,
It's really incredible.
And you think about all, accidents that happen on a daily basis, train derailments, bus accidents, and how much of that is someone focused on the wrong thing.
You bring up a really good point. One of the things I write about in the book a lot is that our lives are in the hands of other people's observation skills. It's not just about what we see, but the subway conductor, the bus driver, the doctor, other people's observation skills are really impacting our lives in a very powerful way.
I mean, I remember, and we will go to the slides now, but I remember someone I knew getting an MRI, and it was another doctor reading it, and his observational skills were so poor that he actually was like, I don't even know where to look on this thing. Like, you're not my patient, I don't know where to look.
Isn't that amazing?
And it's so great that you teach medical students that is clearly the incorrect approach in dealing with patients.
And what we tell our medical students in the program repeatedly, everybody's reliant on technology. Technology's not going to go away. We need our phones, we need MRIs, we need all that. But I tell the medical students, when you walk into the room, just look at your patient. Before you pick up that chart, just look at your patient. What are they wearing? Are they wearing their own pajamas or a hospital gown? Are there flowers on the table? How does their expression change when you walk into the room? You will get so much information from your patient before you look at what the night nurse has written. We really have strong senses of observation, and I try to bring it out in the book that we need to rely on that, and then there's always time to get more information.
And it really only takes a second, right?
It takes a second, that's it.
So when people say they don't have time,
they do have time. Absolutely. Or I say, make the time.
The time. So are you guys ready to get involved here? There's no right or wrong answer, am I correct?
There is no right or wrong answer.
Let's start.
Okay, can we have the first slide, please? Okay, I'd like you to raise your right hand in the air, please. Everyone raise your right hand. Now, you can only put your hand down if you see something definitive and absolute in the picture in front of you. If you see something absolutely definitive that you could describe to somebody who wasn't looking at this picture, you can put your hand down. Now, I see that most of you still have your hands up. So I'm going to tell you, those of you who have your hands up, that you're looking at a mammal. If you see a mammal in this picture, you can put your hand down. Look at all those hands that are still up. Now I'm going to tell you that there's a four-legged mammal in the picture. If you see a four-legged mammal, you can put your hand down. All right, you can all put your hands down now. Can I have the next slide, please? Do we have it? It was a cow. Did anyone in the audience see the cow? Now, can we go back to the first slide, please?
Wait, someone in the back raised.
Did I have a raised hand?
Yeah.
I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Wow.
Excellent.
I'm so impressed. I did not see the cow.
Now, go back to the first slide. Now, do you all see the cow now? You can't unsee what I've shown you. Now, the reason I start all of my classes with this exercise is about 2 years ago, I went to hear a man speak, and his name was Apollo Robbins. Now, for those of you who don't know who Apollo Robbins is, he's a professional con man. And he now works on the right side of the law, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. Apollo Robbins was standing at the door of the auditorium, and he shook everybody's hand. I didn't know who he was, so I shook his hand. We got to our seats, bracelets were gone, watches were gone, wallets were gone. He took everything he could. And I said to myself, I want to hear what this guy has to say. So after he returned all our stuff, he put this cow up. And he asked us to do exactly what I asked you to do. Raise your right hand. So I went with a friend of mine. She saw that cow immediately. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, is that a platypus over there? Is there a kitten down there? I saw nothing. And my friend leans over and says, I can't believe you don't see this. Now, first I get a little nervous, and then I start to sweat profusely because this is what I do for a living, and I saw nothing. So she saw it immediately. I saw nothing. I begin with the premise that no two people see anything the same way.
Are we ready for the next one?
We're ready for the next one. Now, I have a theme in my program. It's called Handsome Women of the 18th Century. And this is the first one in my series of handsome women, and her name is Mrs. Hannah Winthrop. And I tell all my classes that Mrs. Hannah Winthrop is probably the most important slide of the whole presentation and is the most relevant to the work that people do. And they think, yeah, right. Why is she important? She has a red and white bow in her bonnet. She's a brunette. She has dimples, multiple chins, multiple pearls, blue silk dress, blue and white bow, and she's sitting in a chair, and she's holding 2 nectarines. What does that have to do with law enforcement or medicine or intelligence? Here's the problem. You see at the bottom of the painting, there's that mahogany table, and there's this incredible reflection, and you can see her sleeve and her arm and her fingers. If I asked everyone in the room to describe this painting, more than half of you would leave the table out of your description. And you think, so what? It's a portrait of a woman. Who cares about the table? Here's the problem. That table is hiding in plain sight. And when you don't see it, what happens in the real world? Something is hiding right in front of your eyes, you fail to see it, and you don't talk about it. How many times have you ever said to someone, how did I miss that? So I tell people, don't let the mahogany table trip you up. Crazy.
I mean,
in a painting.
it's
crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've been doing this for so many years, and after every session, I ask myself, how is art resonating so strongly? Art is really powerful. It's just how we have to look at it. And when people realize that it's relevant to the work that they're doing, they really look very carefully. It amazes me. All right, should we try one more?
Let's do one more.
Okay, next slide. Okay, now I want you to take a look at the slide that I've put up on the screen, and I want you to think about one sentence that you would write to describe what you observe in the slide. Make a sentence up in your head. One short sentence to describe what you see in this slide. Okay? Think. Now I'm going to get up and show you something. I want you to raise your hand if your sentence did not include the letter C. The letter C. Raise your hand if you did not see the letter C. Do you all see it right now? See that?
It's the most obvious thing in the picture now.
But did you see it when you first looked at the slide? You did. Did some of you not? Raise your hand again if you did not see the letter C. More than 50% of you. Now, let me tell you what that means. It doesn't mean you have terrible observation skills. Let me tell you what's happening in the slide. There's a young woman in the late teens, early 20s, wearing a red fleece jacket, walking next to a wrought iron fence. If you were to dive over that fence, you'd be in the Harlem River. On the opposite bank of the Harlem River is this huge expanse of rocks on which is painted this giant letter C, because if you're rowing crew in the Harlem River, no question whose territory you're in but Columbia University. That's the big C for Columbia University. Now, when I've been using this exercise since like 2006, 50% of the people that look at this slide do not see the letter C. 50%. Now, for me, it jumped right out at me. It's the first thing that I saw. But I really don't care about the C. I worry about two people in the boardroom, two people in the same class, two people in the operating room who walk away with fundamentally different perceptions of what they just saw. You could be sitting next to somebody who saw this picture completely differently than you did. What happens in real life? That's what I'm trying to deal with. So the answer, the way you can reconcile this, what happens if you see the C and the person next to you doesn't? What do? You do what I just did. You narrate with clarity, precision, and objectivity what you observe. Don't say obviously, don't say clearly. Narrate what you see, and one of two things will happen. You'll either convince the person to see it the way you do, or you'll agree to disagree. But either way, you've covered yourself.
And in fact, a point that you bring up is pretty terrifying, that two people in the operating room with someone cut open could see two entirely different things.
Absolutely.
Because that's a life at stake.
Absolutely.
And that's a situation where you don't have 5 hours to debate what it is that you're seeing.
Well, one of the things, having been a hospital patient for a long time, one of the things I've discovered in medicine that's really quite reassuring, when surgeons operate on you now, they write on your body, and they say what they're going to do. So I met a woman who had stage 3 breast cancer, and she knew what I did for a living, and she said, Amy, I'm so excited. Guess what they did? She was having a mastectomy on the left side. She said, guess what they wrote on my body? She said, on the left side, they wrote yes, and on the right side, they wrote no. And I said, you know what? Everybody should communicate with that kind of clarity. So when she was on the operating table, there was no question what was going to happen. Everybody should communicate with that kind of clarity.
And I think we have one more slide.
We do have one more slide. There we go.
Oh, I think you guys all know the dress, right?
Yeah, you can
the
all
dress that broke the internet.
Want. Now, I use art images for the majority of my presentation, but I begin with these two slides because they sum up my whole presentation. For anybody who doesn't know what the slide on the right is, and I can't imagine there's anyone in this room who doesn't, about 1.5 years ago, a woman in the UK bought this dress to wear in a wedding, and she put it up on Facebook. And for reasons still unbeknownst to me, she put the question up, what color is my dress? And my first response was, who cares? You bought the dress, you're wearing it in the wedding, who cares? So for some reason, the question and the responses went viral in the biggest possible way. I still don't know why. So let me test the audience here. Look at the picture on the right, and raise your hand if you see that dress is white and gold. Unbelievable. All right, hands down. If you're sane like me and you see it as blue and black, raise your hand. Okay, put your hands down. And anybody see it as anything else? Anybody see it as purple and blue? Good, because I don't want to know about that. So in my classes, 60% of the people see that dress as white and gold, 39 is blue and black, and then I always have some troublemaker who says it's purple and brown, and I just say, be quiet. I don't want to hear about that. Here's the issue. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a neurobiologist. I'm not going to talk about rods and cones in the brain. This is the way it is. We perceive things very differently. My son has 20/20 vision. He sees it as white and gold. I see it as blue and black. My vision is fine. I'm not going to get into a discussion. I just want people to recognize who cares about the dumb dress, what happens in real life, what happens in the boardroom, what happens in the operating room, what happens at the crime scene. That's half the class. The other half of the class, do you all know what a Domino's pizza box looks like? Sure you do. About 1 year ago, there was a particularly heinous crime committed in Washington, D.C. A CEO, his wife, their child, and their housekeeper were held hostage, killed, and the house was set on fire. The next day, Crime Scene Investigation Unit came in, and one of those analysts not only had the wherewithal to notice, but to say out loud when he saw the Domino's pizza box on the floor, he said, do you think this is the kind of family that would order Domino's pizza? He said it out loud. And with a gloved hand, he picked up the top of the pizza box, and there were some discarded crusts, picked one up, put it in a plastic bag, sent it away for DNA analysis. Do you know they had a suspect within 48 hours?
Oh my God.
Based on the DNA in the saliva on the pizza crust. Now, in my world, we call that good police work, but it's more than that, and I apologize for the pun. It's thinking outside the box. I'm sorry. It's thinking outside the box. But the other half of my class is, how do you solve problems creatively? What solved yesterday's problem isn't going to work tomorrow. And I want to give people the tools to recognize, A, no two people see anything the same way, and B, we need to solve problems differently than we have in the past.
So question for you. For people who don't take your course, which, by the way, is held in the basement of the Met and sounds absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
I mean, the fact that you're in the basement of the Met is on its very own just insane. What are some things that we can put into practice to observe, to become better observers?
Well, I should tell you also, I teach about 60% of my classes in museums around the country, but there are reasons that some of my clients can't go to museums. They're so far undercover that they can't be out in public. I train CEOs that are too busy to leave the office. So we do the program in all kinds of places, but we always use art. And one of the things that I tell people, in New York City, we have this wonderful thing called the New York City subway. And it gives you this amazing opportunity to see the weird, the unusual, the everyday. But the warning is, if you're lost in your earbuds, you're missing a lot. And the cops have always told me that when you're on the subway, every time those doors open, you see who gets on, who gets off, and could you narrate a scene for what's going on in your subway car? It gives you this incredible opportunity to test your observation skills. And when you're on the sidewalk, you know, most people in New York are going from point A to point B fast. What happens when you see the same person on the sidewalk? You just pass them and then you see them again. It always catches my eye. And we need to practice. We need to look. We need to observe, because most people, the world is just going right by.
Is that why when you ask, or not you, the police ask people to describe a suspect,
Absolutely.
you will get 10 different descriptions of 10 different people?
Absolutely.
Or I'm sorry, 10 different descriptions of one person.
Same person. And I'll tell you a story, actually, that happened in New York City. I always wear a dress or a suit when I teach, but on the weekends, I do not. And about 9 years ago, I was on the subway on a Saturday morning. I had long hair then, so my hair was in a ponytail. I had a backpack on, jeans, a sweatshirt, no jewelry. 2 guys were watching me. I saw. They were looking at me, pointing and laughing, and they were frightening looking. They had on sunglasses, they had teardrops, tats on their faces. They were filthy, and I was scared. And the cops have always told me, if you even perceive that you're in a dangerous situation, get out. So I decided to do what New Yorkers know how to do, and I thought, I'm going to switch cars at the next stop. I'm going to jump out and go into the next car, or if it's really bad, I'm going to wait for the next train. I get up to move to the door. One of these disgusting people puts his hand on my arm, and he leans in and he says, "We're undercover. We took your art class." Yeah. I thought I was going to vomit. I was like, what? He said, "Yeah, we couldn't figure out where we knew you from." I said to my partner, "Where do we know her from?" And he said, "She's the art lady." And there it was, only in New York.
That is a great note to turn it over to our audience. If you guys don't have questions for this lady, I swear, because I could go on for hours, but I won't.
Please.
I will not monopolize.
Hey, Amy. Absolutely fascinating way to start a Friday.
Thank you.
I know tons of talented people who I think have all the ability in the world to get to a certain place, but because they're so focused on one thing, they tend to miss out on things that are going around them. What's the one possible best tip I could give them to apply today to maybe see things a little bit differently and get them on the road to get them where they need to be?
It's a good question, because we are all so wrapped up. We're wrapped up in our technology. We're barraged by information. We have emails. We have texts. The really simple, I have two pieces of advice. Number one, stop saying obviously and clearly, and be able to describe exactly what you mean. Because when you have to describe with clarity, it forces you to think differently about what you're seeing.
And let me just, and the reason to stop saying obviously and clearly is because it's off-putting and...
Well, it's very off-putting, but for the even simpler reason, we live and work in a really complex world. Nothing's obvious, and even less is clear. I love it when, well, it's sad, in the plane investigations, when these planes disappear, I love it when people on the news say, well, obviously it's terrorism, or obviously there was a malfunction. There's nothing obvious about it. There's nothing obvious about it. So yeah, it is very off-putting. And also, I tell people, look up. Look up from your screens. Look away from your computers. Look up from your phones. I'm not saying get rid of it, but people that are so wrapped up in their minutia lose the big picture. And what I love to tell people, go to an art museum. Just put your phone down, go to an art museum and look. And by changing your environment, going someplace different, looking at things differently, it clears your brain out and you're going to see the world differently. No obviously, no clearly. Look up from your screens. And third, if you have time, go to an art museum.
In the front?
Hi, sorry. Thank you so much for being here today. Your
My
book
pleasure.
sounds amazing. I was wondering, do you have any personal examples of how your life was like put in the hands of somebody else through their observation, and how it impacted the whole situation, and how it could have like changed differently if it was maybe in somebody else's perspective?
Yeah, I do have a personal experience, and it's actually kind of recent. We were just talking about it back there. I'm a cancer survivor. That's why my hair is so short. And thank you. Thank you. And the picture in the book has me with really long hair, and then I was bald, and now I look like this. And I tell you that because part of when you put yourself in someone else's care, there's a degree of empathy that you think is going to happen. And when you're a cancer patient, they inserted a port in my chest, and it was so I could get my medication. And it was kind of ugly. It was right here, and it stuck out, and it ran a wire in my neck. And I had it for 2 years because I had to have it for medicine, and I wanted to have it removed. Cancer's over, it's time to get rid of the port. And I said to my doctor, when can we get rid of this? And she said, I like my patients to keep them for 3 years. And I said, 3 years? I don't want this thing. It's a constant reminder, it hurts, it's ugly. And you know what she said? After all, Amy, it's not that bad. Really? How do you know? We need to put ourselves in other people's shoes. I want to say to her, you don't have a lump sticking out on your chest. You don't have a wire. She's a wonderful, wonderful doctor. But when someone says, it's not that bad, think twice. Because I tell people, multiple perspectives make for better decision making. And when I put myself in the care of doctors, I put myself, cops are looking out for us. You really have to think what it's like to be in their shoes. And the one thing I will add to that, I have a tremendous, profound respect for what our law enforcement community does. And there's a lot of criticism now. We live in a very, very difficult culture. Nobody knows what it's like to fire a gun until you're in that position. And so I tell people, broaden your empathy, broaden your vision, because there are a lot of people, as you said, our lives are dependent on their observation skills. So we need to think, what is it like to be them? And to really stretch our empathy and say, maybe I'm not going to make that that assumption about what it is to be a certain way. And so many of the issues we're facing now are about perception. Good question. Thanks.
And in the front?
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, do you show different pieces of art depending on who your audience is or who you're showing? And
Yes.
do you ever have them create their own art at all?
Oh, two good questions. To answer the first one, do I have different works of art? I have thousands of slides because the world of art is unlimited. And I use some pretty edgy works of art. I use provocative. I tell people in my world, they don't have the professional option of looking the other way. So I show them works of art that make them uncomfortable. I show them works of art they may not like. And I show them works of art that they don't understand. Because that's what they have to do in the real world. So do it in the museum first to better equip yourself to do it in the real world. So I pick all kinds of works of art depending on whether I'm working in counter-surveillance or intelligence or law enforcement or medicine or librarians or teachers. I pick different works of art, but the methodology is always the same, how we talk about what we do. And I don't have them create art in my class for the very simple reason I am ferociously untalented. When it comes to creating art, I'm terrible at it. Although what I do is I have drawing exercises. We'll put a slide up, and one person will look at it and the other won't, and you have 1 minute to describe the work of art, and your partner has to sketch it on a piece of paper. Oh. And it tests not only your ability to assess information quickly, how well do you communicate it, and how well do people listen. And I'm really not concerned with the final drawing, but how well do you convey the information? So that's as far as I go in having them draw, but they have to do that a lot in the class.
That is so interesting. And we have time for one more question, please.
Good morning, Mrs. Herman.
Hi.
Okay, so I love your passion about this topic. I believe it's, with everything evolving the way that it is, it's needed, especially with the shifting of their perspective. Mm-hmm. I mentor and speak to a lot of African and Hispanic women that grew up in rougher areas, and they just go through a lot of hard times with little opportunity. Yep. What advice could you relay that I can speak to them, or I'm gonna promote it for them to watch this specific answer of not sharpening their perspective, but changing it as a whole to then sharpen.
Well, first, congratulations on the work you do. That's great work. And what I would tell groups, I speak to all different kinds of groups, and I find that the people that I work with already have good observation and perception skills. That's not the problem. The biggest breakdown that we have, and I would emphasize this with these women, is we need to have better communication skills. I need them to be able to communicate their situation, their narrative, and how they see their way out. Because if you see really well, if you observe well, but you can't communicate, it's lost. And I find that something gets lost from here to here to here and to here. Something gets lost. And I'm trying to help people strengthen that connection between what they observe and what they communicate. So I would tell these women, you know, good for them. They're survivors. They have a great past, and they need to use that strength to move forward, but to really work on their communication skills. Speak well, write well, and be able to advance themselves, because communication is everything. Okay, so good question.
Thank you so much. You are fascinating.
Thank you.
And what you do is just unbelievable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hold the applause for 1 second, please, guys. The book is available now on Amazon, in bookstores, wherever you get your literature.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.